At the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources, undergraduate teaching assistants play a critical role in the delivery of our curriculum, but also just contributing to the environment and the character of the school. They're really important. And so this video that we're making and that people are going to be viewing is dedicated to the undergraduate teaching assistants, the UTAs as we call them. The curriculum in the Rubenstein School is really a systems approach. You know, it's the faculty themselves, it's our community partners, it's the field trip sites. All those things are key. And if we want to really engage with all those parts of the system, the UTAs really become the glue. We depend on the energy and the passion and the knowledge really of these students. Being able to deliver specifically on field labs, and that's a key part of the school, is to get our students out of the field and have that build upon what they're learning in lecture in the classrooms. These undergraduate TAs have often been students in the class themselves. They know the places. These are students who are not that different in age from the students that they're teaching. That peer closeness is actually one of the things that makes this really work well. Where it's a positive thing, you know, to be near an age, it can be also challenging. If you're delivering, sometimes grading material, a person of authority, it can be a challenging position. And to inhabit that well takes confidence. And that's part of what we want to develop. Undergraduate teaching assistants are really critical to the mission of the school. The whole idea of unleashing empathy and passion and all that really begins with connection to place. And as place-based educators in the Rubenstein Corps, you know, it's really about helping connect people. How do you do that? Well, certainly we're going to be conveying in lecture, but it's really about how do we connect this to field experiences, and you all are the conduits for that. So we've been asking, you know, for different teaching tips that people have been out there for years teaching or maybe learning the hard way. We've been asking people what tips would they provide.
Okay, so I am a part-time faculty now. I just recently retired after, amazingly enough, 45 years at the Rubenstein School, and I've had a lot of experience teaching outdoor classes. Some of the students they may be working with are fellow students in another class, and yet they're a TA in this class. And so you gotta be able to identify your role and play that role. And that often starts with just, you're in charge of taking attendance or something like that. So the students know you've got a responsibility to make sure they show up, that they learn, they participate, and try and get them excited and keep them engaged in the topic. I'm very selective in who I choose. You gotta have the right person.
Definitely been outside a lot. So I'm teaching GIS here, but I'm really a marine ecologist. So lots of stuff on the water. Make sure you have backups for everything. Nothing says that your day sucked when somebody drops the GPS in the ocean, right? That has all the data for the whole class. I was in the military, so something that I was always taught was to set up a buddy system. So when you take a big class out, or even a small class, if you assign students to each other, nobody gets left at the site, nobody gets lost. If somebody gets hurt, there's already a person with them. You have to prepare for all these things. You're like a camp counselor, basically. Yes, you're teaching something, it's really important, but you're really like the boo-boo detector, the person that wore the wrong shoes to take the hike. I'm from California. I can't tell you how many times people come in flip-flops to go down into like the wilderness where there's things that bite you. So try to think of all the silly things that somebody might do, not necessarily on purpose, and prep for that ahead of time. And then just ask and be real. You know, it's hard. You don't have to be perfect. You're not. You're never going to be. And students will appreciate that for you. Yeah.
I think my biggest tip for undergraduate teaching assistants is sort of being proactive, is rather than standing and waiting for students to ask you questions, to kind of walk around and encourage critical thinking, ask them open-ended questions to get them to kind of think about, you know, why is this site different from the other site? Or how does what we're doing today in the field relate to what you're learning in lecture? I find that if I stand waiting for students to ask me a question, they don't. But then if I walk and stand next to their group, then they're more likely to ask questions.
It's really about how to deliver and engage with your students during the actual lab experience. And when you're outside, there's all sorts of challenges, and generally you're going to have a group of 20 with you. Being, the leader, you have to engage with all of them and with them as individuals. And so being in a position to do that by giving clear instructions, like right when you get off the bus, it's all happening. Hey, welcome everybody. And you're going to introduce things. Speaking in a clear, good volume voice is critical. Good eye contact with everybody, having them gather in a circle. Make sure everything is clear to folks what's going on that day. So it's kind of reviewing and then giving clear instructions. Sometimes that's introducing a piece of equipment. To demonstrate that is really good. And demonstrating it in a way that engages students. Engaging with them verbally in dialogue and just being attuned to that you're speaking to a whole group, and then bouncing around is really important. Sometimes you get blank stares. What do you do with that? There's ways around that. One is just being comfortable with silence and almost joke, hey, I'm going to wait. We got all the time in the world. Let's get this together. And that'll draw people out. And, sometimes you just have to be going out on a limb and be a little bit of an actor. You want to be your authentic self, but you want to be your extroverted self at that moment.
One of the things that comes up often for teaching, especially in outdoor settings, but it can come up everywhere, is when you'll ask a question of students and you'll get crickets. So a common question that I get is, what do we do if no one responds to a question? One of the tricks that I picked up is a combination of what I would call pair shares and cold calling. And the key things there, so say you ask a question and nobody answers and you're not quite sure what to do next. So I would pause, ask the question again, and then give people a few seconds, say, I'm going to give you maybe like 10, 15 seconds, just think about how you would respond to this. And then I ask people to pair up. If I'm outside, I might say, just turn to one or two people next to you and share your thoughts on this question. And then I'll call the group back together. And then what I do is I call on individual groups. So rather than saying, who has an answer for this? Can someone raise their hand? I'll just call, hey, this partner pair over there. And because people have thought about it and talked about it, and there's this sort of partner pair thing where one person or the other can jump in, it's a lot less scary. That sort of offers an entry point that's really accessible to most people.
My name is Peter Newman. I'm Dean of the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. I was a TA at Rubenstein, probably 25 years ago, and I learned a lot about teaching people outside. There are probably three things that I think are really important. First and foremost, and especially as Dean, it's safety. It's making sure that if you go out with 10 people, you come back with 10 people. Second, I think for learning, when people want to learn, you've got to think about comfort, right? So for example, if you're talking and the sun is behind you, the sun is in the eyes of your students. So flip it around. Take the sun in your eyes, let the students be looking at you. And third, there's always something that doesn't go your way when you're out there. Things don't always go as planned. Have something else up your sleeve. Have an exit strategy. Have a way to think about, hey, if this doesn't work out, this is what I'm going to do next. I mean, in the end, the outside teaches us. We're getting those experiences. That's 90% of that learning. And so you facilitating a safe environment, providing them those extra details, and making sure they're having fun, passionate, and safe, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about perfectionism and failure, that it's okay to fail. What would you say to UTAs about that as they're practicing teaching as they come up?
Well, one is I think, there's no failure, right? There's learning. This is all about learning. It's learning for your students and learning for yourself. You're going to get out there and you're going to get to know the students and you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't work. As you do it more, you're going to learn. And that's what's key, is not saying, success or failure. Just keep learning, keep smiling, keep having fun, keep being safe. It'll all go well.
My main tip is to go slow. Everyone, when they start teaching, at least in my experience, you have a tendency to want to fill the air with your voice, and you want to get out the material that you've prepared to talk about, and you go too fast. It's just a natural tendency. So to the extent that you can, when you're talking to your students, take deep breaths, let the air breathe, let silence exist. If you ask a question and no one immediately raises their hand, you don't have to fill the dead air. You can just let it sit for a second. A lot of people want to raise their hand, they want to contribute, they want to ask a question, but they need more than like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 seconds to do that. And so being patient, taking your time, and not rushing through things is just my basic advice as you start out.
I have 3 tips to share. The first one, it's better to be prepared and to be safe than to be cool. So simple things like wearing sunscreen, wearing a hat when you're outside, dressing appropriately, layering is really helpful in Vermont, but also things like tucking in your pants to your socks so you don't get ticks, and other ways to prepare like that, thinking about the 10 essentials, first aid. In teaching outside, a lot of things come up along the way too, so planning and being prepared for that can also be really helpful. The cool bug that someone pointed out, the nice view that you're walking past, other funky things that you find in the forest. Even if you've been to a place before, a lot of students, it's their first time maybe. So it can be helpful to kind of plan accordingly and to be excited about the things that the students are excited about, because it is a great opportunity to engage. And then finally, to follow up and follow through. Again, being outside, you have a lot more opportunity to engage with students and really get to know them one-on-one and have casual conversations. And so it's harder to remember some of the things that come up. But if students are more comfortable and they maybe bring up some of the challenges, or you notice a student really struggling in that space, it's important to follow up with them, make sure that they have the support that they need.
My name is Aaron Massey. I'm an accessibility specialist in the Office of Student Accessibility Services. And my primary role is to determine eligibility for accommodations for students. I talk a lot about just normalizing conversations around accessibility and disability, letting folks know that it's if you have a need that's not being met, or there's a barrier that's keeping you from doing the things you need to be doing, to reach out to our office so that we can support students with getting accommodations if they need them in the classroom. Some students being outside would be amazing, and for other students it could be really challenging. You know, students that have allergies, students that have sensory impairments, they may find different challenges in the classroom than they might find outside, like in a lab setting, or just being outside in an outdoor classroom. So I think just being really mindful of that. I think one thing that potentially could be useful, and you may already do this, is just surveys. Just checking in with students and asking them about what their needs are and what challenges they might face in different environments, so that you have that going in and can make adjustments from there. Giving them choice in how they engage in the coursework can be really a great way towards moving towards what we call universal design.
So I have one tip for the students, and it comes from the climate that we exist in today, and that is, don't be afraid to share your values. I love being with people who can start a sentence with, "I believe." And I think that here at the Rubenstein School, we often are just hungry, greedy even, for new information and facts and skills and how we're developing those things. But values really underlay what we do with that knowledge and why, how those values help us align the mission of our lives. And so to have a TA who can say to her or their students, "I believe in," is a really powerful thing to get to say. To share your values with your students. Use "I believe" statements and encourage your students to think about their values and what they believe in, so that those facts and knowledge and skills that they're getting at the same time are supported by values of how they'll live in the world.
The two that I would say that come to my mind are preparation and authenticity. If you think about those for a minute, preparation, we're preparing right now. We're out here at Jericho getting a sense of the field sites. Chris has been sharing things. So preparation is key, and knowing what the course is all about and your role in delivering on that. When we get to what do you need to do ahead of time, you know, a lot of it is contained in you know, things like these lab guidelines. So being really familiar with them, the protocols, the follow-up exercises, just kind of going with the end in mind. Your students at the end of the lab, ultimately they're going to need to do assignment. You want to prepare them as well as you can, but you want to prepare yourself too by being deeply familiar with what's there. For most classes, there's a folder of auxiliary materials that we're using, usually on Brightspace. Just spending time preparing as best you can. Big part of it is also preparing your students. So communicating with them ahead of time. That's happening in lecture, but having emails that you send out, you know, can't do this too much, is making sure they know what to wear, how to prepare, what to bring, reminders about that is really, really important. So preparation. Now, I do want to say though that, you know, although preparation is key, we do not expect perfection by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, you know, we expect mistakes, absolutely, okay? And that's what this experience is about. We make mistakes all the time. But in the beginning, you know, it's normal to make mistakes. Doesn't mean there's no preparation involved. You know, you don't want to make the preparation of not being prepared as you can. That's the one thing that we ask. Sometimes that's at a premium though, having enough time to prepare in your busy schedules. But just as we start this adventure, know that if you prepare, that's what we're asking for. And then the delivery of it, in some ways, it's come what may. Things you're going to learn as you go along. And that's where the authenticity piece is coming in. As undergraduate teaching assistants, you've been in this class, but you're learning the material, you have experience as life, but you don't know it in detail. Students are going to ask you, what's this? Or, you know, what's happening over here? You may not know, and that is entirely okay. This is where the authenticity piece is. We just want you to be yourselves. And I can tell you, students crave authentic relationships. They can see it when it's not there, if you're trying to fake it, or any of us, if we're not being ourselves. So really, that balances the preparation, and you can do this. And so I know people will be nervous about when they're starting. That's okay too. You can share that, you know, to some degree that you are nervous, but it's about having an authentic relationship with your students. So being yourselves, I'm just going to make a plea for that, mistakes and all as they happen. I wanted to invite, if anybody has anything from their experience, a tip, you know, something that sticks with them, that they've learned, can be anything. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most common things that I saw last semester when I was TAing was if you're speaking to your group of 20 students for like a long time, it starts to become really boring for them, and engaging them with like certain questions, even if it's not even related to the content, and making sure that they're still engaged, they're still actively listening is really important. One, you're still building your relationship with them, and two, maybe they're more interactive with the material.
Yeah, this whole idea of engaged teaching, it's huge. Anything else come to mind for people? Yeah, let's pass it around to Mary Jane here.
I think like one of the biggest ones is enthusiasm, authentic enthusiasm, like you were talking about, like being authentic to yourself. But I find oftentimes when people aren't excited about something themselves, the group just like dies down. And it can be hard to like push through and be like, okay, everyone's like kind of tired right now. Like I need to be that person that's excited, especially because it makes you stand out, not fit in. And I think that can be hard for people. But I think in the position that we are in, it's really important to push through worrying about what other people think and to be that enthusiastic person. So I think be excited, show that like awe and wonder that you want them to embody, because they're not going to embody it if you don't embody it yourself.
Yeah, I hear you. You're modeling enthusiasm. Great point about authenticity. You might be feeling more fear than enthusiasm at that moment. It's absolutely true. And that's a point where, in some ways, teaching is, being a part of yourself that is working with a group. There's no doubt. You're playing that role. Authentically you, there's a part of you that's like that. Bring that to the forefront. Anybody else want to add one? Yeah, pass it around.
I think one really big thing that I've learned working with kids in general is you just have to take it in stride. Take like the mistakes and the kids doing crazy things, and obviously it's going to be a little different because I've only ever worked with younger kids and these are adults. But like when mistakes happen or when slips happen, Or if there's a kid who doesn't like you because, you know, you like what Mary Jane was saying, like you have to stand out and you have to be enthusiastic and you have to be kind of like an over exaggerated version of yourself sometimes to get the class going and to do what you need to do. You just have to take it in stride and keep moving and focus on your goal. That's something that I found is really helpful for me.
Excellent. We've got another one. Pass it around.
I think just making every student feel seen as a unique individual is super important, especially when they're in a class of 322 students. They need to know that there's somebody that wants to get to know every single one of their interests and is encouraging them and also can relate to them because we are only a few years older than them. We were just in the same position. Just being able to be that person for them to go to and talk through any issues they might be having. And for me, I like to get to know some of their personal interests that are not related to class. And then I try to remember them, bring them up, keeps them engaged, keeps them wanting to come to lab, which is the biggest thing. And I find that it works really great to kind of have that friendship as well as being a leader to them.
Thank you so much for raising that. We've got a huge class. It can feel impersonal when they're arriving. Our antidote to that is having groups this size with a teaching assistant who is really honed in on exactly what you're talking about, making a connection, making them feel heard authentically and seen and included. So you've heard a lot of teaching tips and ideas that come through this. You know, some of them may resonate, some of them may not. The ultimate goal is for a person to develop their own teaching philosophy of what's important and their own set of best practices. And having these even written down as touchstones and really kind of grow these as you go along so you're prepared to share your tips, you know. The opportunity to be an undergraduate teaching assistantship or a teacher in general is just a huge responsibility and source of joy. You know, we often don't realize this at the time, the impact that we can have on people. You know, you may be doing just simple things by modeling being yourself and in your enthusiasm. This could trigger something in somebody that is, boy, I want to do that. You know, I want to be like this. I want to have that attitude. I'm interested in that. I can't tell you the number of times teaching assistants, when they're applying to work with us, talk about the influence their UTA had on them 2 years ago. It's huge, and you're going to have that influence kind of no matter what, whether you realize it or not. And so thank you for how you're investing in our future, really, you know, our future scientists, naturalists, educators. It's hugely important.